Aloha, and welcome to the monthly public presentation of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. Since 1990, the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii has been following our mission of promoting human health, animal rights, and protection of the environment by means of vegetarian education, as we've grown to become one of the largest all-volunteer, nonprofit vegetarian societies in the nation. It is now time to introduce our special guest. We're very happy to have with us tonight John Kohler. John Kohler has been on an uncooked, plant-based diet since 1995, when he turned to raw foods for healing from a life-threatening illness, spinal meningitis, and has enjoyed dynamic health ever since. The focus of his research has been in the area of obtaining the highest level of health. One of John's goals is to educate the world about the benefits of fruits and vegetables. He is the founder and creator of the largest raw food website on the internet, www.rawfoods.com, that he started in 1997. John also owns and manages www.discountjuicers.com and is the #1 expert on raw food appliances and gadgets in the world. His latest projects are www.growingyourgreens.com, where he teaches people how to grow food at home. Atokraw.com, you can learn from his wealth of raw food knowledge. Most of his teaching is done on YouTube, where his 2,200 plus videos have been viewed over 80 million times. Really, over 80 million times. So tonight is a wonderful and rare opportunity to hear John in person. His presentation is entitled, Grow and Eat Your Way to Better Health Today. Please join me in welcoming John Kohler.
All right, so let me go ahead and start off. Thank you for having me. I want to thank VSH for sponsoring me and inviting me to come to the talk tonight. I'm a long fan of VSH, even though I live on the mainland. For years now, I've been watching actually the VSH YouTube videos that they've been uploading that contain a wealth of knowledge. So I do encourage all you guys, whether you're in person or watching online, to check out all the other VSH educational videos they have online. It is simply amazing, and my health has grown from it because of all the information that I've received. Let's see, today's talk is entitled, Grow and Eat Your Way to Better Health Today. I mean, the main reason why I'm standing here today is because my life was saved through diet, and besides just diet, there's many other factors that you need to do to have health besides just diet. Getting enough sleep, getting enough exercise, getting sun, being in a good emotional state. I like to say being in a peaceful state instead of a stress-filled state. But today I'm just going to talk about what I've learned regarding diet and what you eat, because what you eat is one of the most important things in my opinion. And basically how I got here is after I got out of college, I had what's called spinal meningitis. This is a life-threatening illness. It takes many people's lives away. I was basically hospitalized, put in intensive care in the emergency room. I ended up waking up with IVs stuck inside me, and I had to ask the doctor, hey doctor, when am I gonna get out of here? Because when you go to the hospital, my whole concept of doctors and hospitals, as a kid anyways, we go in with a cold or flu, the doctor sees you, he tells you something, he might give you a prescription medicine, you go home, and then you get better. And so that was my thing, you go to the doctors, they make you better, you go home, and then you're all right. Little to my amazement, when I was lying in the hospital with IV stuck in me, waking up, and I asked the doctor, when am I gonna get out of here? He said the words to me that you never wanna hear, but especially when you're not in your 20s like I was. And he said, you might not make it out of here alive. And I'm thinking in my head, man, that's not supposed to happen to me until I'm at least 60 or something. And I mean, I know better now, it should not happen to us until we're about 150 or 200 if you're living properly. But nonetheless, I was a kid back then, and that's what I thought. But anyways, so it really scared me at the time to know that wow, I'm at the end of my life. I never had fallen in love, never had raised a family, never even made $1 million. And even if I did make $1 million, if I had a check to write to the doctor, Mr. Doctor, $1 million, do not cash unless John walks out of here alive, he couldn't even have guaranteed that I was going to walk out of there, even if I had the most money in the world. I mean, there's millionaires, bazillionaires losing their lives every day, and their money cannot buy them out of sickness. And so luckily, at a young age, I really took to heart, because we've all heard this expression that I'm going to share with you guys, that health is your greatest wealth, right? We've all heard that. But sometimes, we do things in our lives that may not be the healthiest. I mean, hopefully none of you guys here are smokers. But I mean, on every packet of cigarettes, there is a cancer warning. That's mandated by law now. One of these days, there'll hopefully be cancer warnings and warnings on foods that will harm you, in my opinion, and based on my research. But at this point, we don't. But nonetheless, people still choose to smoke. I mean, I walked by people today that was smoking, and I mean, they know it's printed on there that it may and probably will compromise their health and lead to disease. And the only thing I wish in the presentation that I'm going to share with you guys tonight is that I just want people to know the consequences of their actions. Unfortunately, in our society, we are sold products and food products and all kinds of different things, for convenience and for basically the companies to make money off you. And they don't really care how it's going to affect your health, because the marketer's job is to basically to separate you from your dollars and your money to get your money. And I mean, I went to school for business management marketing, so I know these things. Fortunately now, I use my business management marketing degree to market the healthy stuff to people, to try to get them to make the positive changes in their lives. But I just want people to know the knowledge of what could happen to you if you do this. When I was young, one of the things that wasn't the smartest thing to do was I saw my grandparents smoking, and I see them in the car, they'd push in the cigarette lighter, it would pop out, they'd take it, they'd put it up to the cigarette, and it would light and they'd smoke or whatever. And so as a kid, I popped in the cigarette lighter. I didn't have any cigarette. I took it out and then I just stuck it on my tongue. I mean, I'm a kid. I didn't know any better. And boy, did I learn something, that, hey, never stick the cigarette lighter on your tongue because that hurts. My brother had a similar learning experience. My brother, he actually stuck his hand on a hot, red, flaming electric burner in the house. And, then he learned that, hey, you don't stick your hand on the burner. Unfortunately, these are immediate reactions, right? When you smoke, you don't immediately get lung cancer and lose your life. When you eat foods that aren't the healthiest for you, you don't immediately be like, oh, I got a stomach ache, or, you don't immediately keel over or something, right? These things happen over time. So I just try to make people aware of the consequences, and you all could make the choice what you choose to do in your lives. I just think people should have the knowledge. And I mean, I think that's the saddest thing, is that we're just not given the proper knowledge so that we can make the proper choices if you so choose. If you so choose to smoke, I wish you well, just don't smoke near me, right? And if you choose to eat the foods that may bring you not the best health, that's your choice, because you love the flavor more, and I don't really care. But I'm just sharing my information, what really has helped me, and hopefully you guys could use some of the knowledge to help you as well. So anyways, I got out of the hospital, luckily enough, I couldn't say through any dietary changes, but I can say through higher powers is what I like to say, because there was no medical treatment for me. So I was given a second chance. So as you just heard, I really started to value my health. And upon leaving the hospital, one of the things I want to encourage everybody is to always ask better questions in life, whether that's to your doctor, whether that's to your husband or wife, or whether that's to your coworkers, because you'll get a better answer. And so I asked the doctor, hey, why did I get into the hospital in the first place? Why did I get sick? None of my other fraternity brothers that I was hanging out with the night before playing broomball, got sick or got spinal meningitis, and that's a pretty big disease. Like, the health department had to come out and do interviews and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, well, John, we determined you have what's called complement immune deficiency. And what that is, basically, in layman's terms, from what I understand, because I'm not a doctor or anything like that, he said it's a chronically weak immune system based, and he blamed it on my genes. He said, you got defective genes, so you have a weak immune system. And if any of you guys saw the Boy in the Bubble movies back in the 1970s with like John Travolta, the boy had to live in a bubble because he actually had no immune system. And if he came out of the bubble, he would lose his life because he would get an infection or something like that. And then there's like him over here, and then a normal person over on this side, and then I'm maybe somewhere in the middle. Well, that's what I thought at the time. And so I'm like, what? I really need to do something to increase my immune system. And that's all I left the hospital knowing. I need to do something to increase my immune system, and I had no idea what. And to make a long story short, I first found juicing through Jay Kordich, the Juice Man. And I love Jay and his work. He's getting up there. He's in his 90s these days. but I heard on his infomercial that juicing can build your immune system. And I didn't really know about all this other kind of stuff, but I just knew that I needed to build my immune system, so I bought the juicer and I started juicing. And I kept this up for about 6 months until I came into my next revelation, which is I was in a health food store, and there was a book on the bottom shelf. It was called Cleanse and Purify Thyself by Dr. Richard Anderson. And in that book, he talked about colon cleansing and all these mucoid plaques and all these other things. So then anyways, I got on that program and cleansed out my body, and for the first time in my life, my skin had cleared up. And as a child, I had asthma, allergies, and eczema. And so even the doctors with their hydrocortisone shots and all these things couldn't help any of my asthma, allergies, or eczema. But for the first time after the cleanse, it cleared up. And this was a surprise to me on one level, but not on the other, because I saw in the book where people with psoriasis after going on this cleanse had cleared their skin up. So I really like the power of testimonials on other people's, how you can learn from other people's experiences when they do certain things in life. And so my skin had cleared up, and then I remember looking at my body in the shower when I was taking a shower, and I was crying. And I don't know if I was crying because I was so happy that my skin cleared up for the first time in my life, or I was so scared that I had to eat this raw food diet for the rest of my life, because in the book, he said that if you're gonna go on this cleanse, there's no purpose in going back to eating the foods that basically got you toxified and got you to this point in the first place. So at that point, I decided to just basically eat a plant-based raw diet, and because that was the best diet that I found to build my immune system. Because I learned a lot of things in my journey, and one of the things that actually I learned back then, which actually I know better now, is one of the main reasons why I went raw was to not activate my immune system. So when I learned back in 1995, I learned this. I learned when you eat cooked foods, your immune system basically is enacted. So your white blood cells, which is collectively known as your immune system, increase. And this happens anytime you eat cooked food. And that's what I learned back then. So I'm like, man, I don't want to eat cooked food, because if I eat cooked food, it's going to activate my immune system. And guess what? I have a weak immune system. I don't need my immune system playing the boy who cried wolf, like the fairy tale. So I didn't want to keep activating my immune system when I'm needlessly activating it because of eating cooked foods. Fortunately enough, since then, I've learned better, and that was actually not the most accurate information. I've since then learned that it's not actually the cooked foods that does it, it's actually any animal products that actually will cause an immune reaction in your body. So if you're still eating animal products, this will cause an immune reaction in your body every time you eat animal products. Even the worst cooked vegan junk food, from what I've learned, will not cause a leukocytosis effect. So that's not a reason necessarily to eat junk vegan foods. But anyway, so that's why I started the raw foods, and I learned that the fruits and vegetables are the best foods on the planet. And since 1995, I've tried to live my life with a principle of kanai. There's some Japanese in the audience today, and also known as maybe kaizen in Japan. After the World War, after we bombed Japan, and we sent some businessmen over to Japan to help them rebuild, one of which was named Deming, who I learned about in my business classes. And he talked about a process of constant and never-ending improvement. And so I listened to Tony Robbins back in the 1990s, self-improvement guru, and he also talked about this process of kanai, and it stands for constant and never-ending improvement. And that's why cars like Honda and Toyota are so good quality. You could drive them 200,000 miles as long as you change the oil and do some regular maintenance. They're going to keep lasting, where most American cars, after about 100,000, they're done. And so I've applied this concept to my diet and my life in all areas. How can I always improve? Even though I'm already eating, in my opinion, the best diet on the planet, a raw fruit and vegetable-based diet, how can I make it better? And so that's what I'm really going to share with you guys tonight. And I do personal ongoing research, on almost a daily basis when I have free time, researching online, looking up, journal publications and studies, traveling, going to different events around the country. I was just at the Eco Farming Conference in California just 2 weeks ago. They were learning about the latest in organic farming techniques and how farmers grow stuff. And so that's kind of my background. Let's get into the meat of the talk. So I have some major problems with the food system today, and I'm going to go address some of the problems, and more importantly, I'm going to address some of my solutions that I've come up with. So one of the biggest problems is people are eating the improper types and amounts of foods. There's declining nutrition in the foods that are being grown, and as many people may not think so, we have very limited food choices. And you may not understand that completely right now, but let's go ahead and move on. So what are the results of all these problems? The results of these problems include higher disease rates, a weak immune system, and that's one thing I really wanted to avoid, less energy, excess weight, shorter lifespan, and lower levels of health, which can all lead to some of the top 15 killers of Americans today. And heart disease, cancer, COPD, stroke, accidents, Alzheimer's, diabetes, kidney failure, respiratory infections, suicide, blood infections, liver failure, high blood pressure, Parkinson's disease, and swallowing problems. And so many of these situations can be helped with dietary intervention. So what's the answer to better health and longevity? Well, is the answer go vegan? Will simply excluding all animal products from your life assure you good health? And I would say no. And the reason why I say that is because a vegan diet specifically says what you're not eating. It has nothing to do with what you are eating. And so that's a picture of some just vegan junk foods. So I don't necessarily recommend that. So let's hear from Dr. Michael Greger, one of my favorite plant-based doctors, and he wrote a book, How Not to Die, which I would encourage everybody to read. I'm not a big reader, but I do a lot of listening, so I downloaded it on audible.com and I listened to it while I garden.
There's only one diet ever been proven to reverse heart disease in the majority of patients, a plant-based diet. If that's the only thing a plant-based diet can do, reverse a number one killer, a number two killer here in the UK, shouldn't that be the default diet until proven otherwise? And the fact that it can also prevent, arrest, or reverse other leading killers, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, would seem to make the case simply overwhelming. There's only one diet ever proven to do that. It's hard to cherry pick when there's only one cherry.
And so my research would support Dr. Greger, and my research goes even further. And why does a plant-based diet work? You know, because I'm always asking myself questions like, hey, why does a raw foods diet work? How can I make it work better? And so a plant-based diet works because it eliminates the foods that cause the problem in the first place. So the junk foods, the animal foods, processed foods, and it also increases the foods that can help prevent and reverse disease. And so a recommended course of action is to completely eliminate or massively reduce all the animal foods and processed foods and junk foods, whether they're vegan or not. And of course, massively increase the most beneficial whole plant foods. And so I don't really care if anybody in here is vegan, vegetarian, lacto-ovo, vegetarian, raw foodist, flexitarian, locavore, Mediterranean. I don't care what you eat. Everybody's diet can be improved if you massively increase the amounts of vegetables, leafy greens, herbs, and fruits. And so that's simply what I've been doing. I just massively eat. I mean, my diet is based around fruits and vegetables. Today I had a pineapple for breakfast, and I had long-ons for lunch, and then I'll have like a nice salad with some guacamole for dinner. And so that's pretty much what I eat. I eat those things, but it doesn't matter. Even if you don't, and if you never want to become vegan, I don't care. I want you to massively increase the healthiest foods and massively decrease the foods that cause the health challenges. And so good old fruits and vegetables. And so I have an 80-20 rule that I would like everybody to maybe listen to. We've heard this rule used in many different ways, and I'd like to say this. 80% of a diet should be whole plant foods with an emphasis on the fresh fruits and the fresh vegetables. If you want to have 20%, if you want to call them cheat foods, whether that's a little bit of animal products, less than 10% of your diet sometimes, or you want to have some vegan junk food as a reward on Friday night after a hard work week, I don't really care, but I want the majority of your diet to be the healthiest foods on the planet so that you could actually counteract the foods that aren't so healthy for you. And once again, the focus is on whole plant foods. Olive oil is a processed junk food. It has low nutritional value and is 100% fat. I mean, that's the definition of a junk food, a food that has low nutritional value, but many people still feel that olive oil is a health food. So what do I eat instead of olive oil? I prefer to eat whole olives. When I eat whole olives, I'm in Las Vegas or California, they grow on trees. I could just harvest them. And in Las Vegas, because it's so hot and arid, they just literally dry on the tree. I could pick them off the tree and eat them, and actually they're quite good. Now, don't try to eat them fresh because they don't taste good that way, but if they're properly cured, they're actually quite good. But dried olives, they're a whole food, and besides just having the oil, they also contain fiber, antioxidants, and much more. They're so much more nutritious. And so I know some of you guys might be thinking, John, well, olive oil, that's healthy. So many people say that. Well, I would ask you to think this. We would all agree, hopefully, that white sugar is a junk food, it's a processed food, and it's not healthy for us. So white sugar is to sugar cane, which is a whole food, as compared to olive oil is to whole olives, right? Once we start extracting and processing some of the nutrients or taking things away, the food is no longer whole, and it's not going to confer us all the benefits that a true whole food would. So I don't advocate the use of white sugar, but I will surely drink fresh sugarcane juice that I juice myself. Sugarcane juice, as much as people think, oh man, that has a lot of sugar, the sugarcane juice actually has less sugar than the orange juice that some of you guys drank today. In addition, the sugarcane juice that's made out of fresh sugarcane is basically mostly water, actually. It has actually some sugar in there. It's not super sweet. Depends on when you harvest the cane, but it also has a plethora of phytochemicals and phytonutrients, as well as, more importantly, the trace minerals. The grass family plants could absorb up to 90 different trace minerals. So I really love the sugarcane juice. It's one of my favorite things to drink, and there's some new research that even shows the wax that naturally occurs on the sugarcane, which is it's like a little, if you have sugarcane or have seen it grow, there's like this white powder that forms. They're even doing research, and they take the wax off and they concentrate it and they feed it to people and do research studies, and it's helpful against certain kind of disease. I forget which one, but it's just really interesting, all the different properties of plants that can help us, make us healthy, but when we extract the heck out of it, we're not going to get those benefits. As a side note, I like to say as a tip, sea salt is neither a whole food nor a health food, so we'll let you think about that one. But let's move on. And so the best way, in my opinion, especially if you're not eating your recommended 5 to 9 servings of fresh fruits and vegetables a day, and I encourage you to well exceed that. I probably get 20 to 30 or more servings of fruits and vegetables a day because that's the majority of my diet. And that's simply juicing. So juicing allows you to concentrate the volume and amount of fruits and vegetables that you normally may not be able to eat comfortably. So for example, I couldn't necessarily sit here and eat 5 pounds of carrots if I wanted to get the nutrients out of 5 pounds of carrots, if I so desired. But if I take the 5 pounds of carrots and I run that through a juicer, the juicer extracts all the nutrition from the carrots, less the insoluble fiber. But the juicer keeps the soluble fiber. The soluble fiber is the kind that dissolves in water, because that's what juice is. So it's kind of like when you make sugarcane juice, we're doing the same thing with carrots. We're just removing the insoluble fiber that we really don't digest anyways. And when we do that, I could take 5 pounds of carrots and turn it into 5 cups of carrot juice, which is basically all the nutrients out of the carrots, and I could drink that, and it's going to be more easily absorbed by my body because we have villi in our intestines, and the villi in our intestines, you could think of them as like, I'm not a doctor, so I could say this. You could think of them as little like nose hairs. As nutrients in your intestines go by, the nose hairs kind of go by and they suck up, I mean, that's a really layman's terms, suck up the nutrients, anything in a liquid form. And if something's in a solid form, your body cannot uptake it. So, and especially when you get older, I find many people may have challenges with nutrient absorption. And especially as much as you think, John, I'm eating a lot of leafy greens, but if you're like my dad, unfortunately, he'll take and eat his leafy greens, he'll put them in his mouth, and he eats a good amount of leafy greens and salads and whatnot, but he'll take 2 chews and he swallows. He doesn't masticate his food into a mush. And if you ever think about it, this is why we feed babies baby food, because babies do not have teeth, so they must have things in a mush so that they could get the optimal digestion out of them. Because we have teeth, we should be turning every mouthful and every morsel of food into mush so that we could get optimal digestion out of it. So that's one of the reasons why I like the juicing. You're keeping the soluble fiber, removing the insoluble fiber, faster and better assimilation of nutrients. And for example, in carrots, I've looked it up and I have a chart online actually. The carrots are about 48% soluble fiber. So when you juice carrots, provided you have a good juicer and it's getting all the soluble fiber out, you're going to still get about 50% of the fiber that's in the carrot juice. And I prefer the slow juicing method, and slow juicing preserves more beneficial phytonutrients than blending. And it's these special phytonutrients that are really the most important players, in my opinion, to me at this point. I mean, some people in raw foods might say, oh, John, enzymes are the most important reason to keep your food raw. I would say we really want to preserve the phytonutrients at all costs, because those are the things like the anthocyanins, the lycopene, the lutein, the zeaxanthin, all these fancy big words that you may or may not know, but it doesn't matter if you know them or not. The fact of the matter is, a plant like a tomato can produce up to 300 different plant metabolites. And this is really cool, like just a tomato plant, when the sun hits it, it has all the nutrients it needs, the vitamins and minerals, it produces up to 300 different plant metabolites. Those are what we know as phytonutrients and phytochemicals. It makes these out of thin air because it needs to make these to protect the tomato plant from getting sun scald, from different bugs, from the weather, from different diseases. But when we eat the tomato, we get those beneficial nutrients in us, which also confer health to us. I mean, if you drink too much carrot juice, you'll turn orange, or for some people that are sensitive. And that's basically your body storing all these beta-carotenes in your skin, and that will give you sun protection from the inside out, so we don't have to use sunscreen. I mean, what other animal on earth uses sunscreen? No other animal on earth uses sunscreen except us. But how many people eat a diet devoid of these beneficial phytonutrients and phytochemicals? Anthocyanin, produced on Big Island, is actually one of my favorite phytonutrients, actually. That's one of the researched phytonutrients that can actually really help you with the sun protection. And anthocyanin is actually an algae. It's an extract from an algae. You could take it in little capsules. But yeah, I will take some anthocyanin, but more importantly, the different pigments in the foods. One of my favorites these days are the purple colored pigments, like in, say, purple carrots. There's studies that show, and I don't recommend any kind of animal testing, but unfortunately they did some animal testing and they tested on rodents. And what they did was they fed rodents basically in a standard American diet with junk food, including water that had high fructose corn syrup added to it. And guess what happened to the rodents? The rodents, they gained weight, they started having blood sugar issues, and they had problems with their arteries. And when, after about halfway through the experiment, they took half the rodents aside, and the other half, they kept feeding both sides the junk food, simulating an American diet. But then the one half, they actually took fresh purple carrot juice, and they just fed the rats the purple carrot juice. And the rats that fed the purple carrot juice and ate the junk food lost the weight, had better arterial function, and lost the sensitivity to the, basically reverse the diabetes or the sugar insensitivities they had. So I'm not telling you guys this so that you guys still eat junk food and drink purple carrot juice. I'm just sharing with this with you guys so you guys could know the power of the purple carrot juice and the really highly deeply pigmented foods. So one of my favorite juices to make these days is like purple cabbage with purple carrots and red beets. Oh, and some turmeric with a juiced avocado and some shook-on pepper. I love that. That's a really deep, rich juice full of nutrients. Now, another challenge that's in our food system that I just got over the one about people eating the wrong foods. Now I want to talk about kind of like, this is like more in-depth. This is something that most people won't actually talk to you guys about, but this has been literally my area of study. And I got into a raw foods diet 22 years ago, but I got into only gardening and growing my food, I know, probably over 10 years ago now. And it only became apparent to me after I was into a raw foods diet for a while is that I wanted a way to improve my diet. And if I was already, in my opinion, eating the best foods on the planet, which are the fruits and the vegetables, how could I improve my diet anymore? And I had a friend, Dawn Weaver, who talked about, growing your own food and adding these things called rock dust and to basically growing highly mineralized food, because the food you buy at the store is not really mineralized. And I really didn't understand that. But I listened and I started growing my own food, and the food that I grow at my house tastes significantly better and is more nutritious than the food the money could buy. But anyways, there's declining nutrition in food, and I want to encourage you guys to think of problems in life, or I like to call them actually challenges instead of problems. I like to encourage you guys to think of them as opportunities in disguise instead of a problem. Anyways, there is declining nutrients in food, and this is published information by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They've been using your tax dollars at work to compile data on nutritional content of food since the 1800s, and studies show that foods today have less nutrition. A study published in 2004 in the Journal of American College of Nutrition found reliable declines in 43 different vegetables and fruits, and a British Food Journal study found that 20 vegetables' average calcium content had declined 19%, iron 22%, and potassium 14%. And so this is what's happening to the food, and here's a graph that shows the average mineral content in select vegetables from 1914 to 1997, and this is a sum averages of calcium, magnesium, and iron in cabbage, lettuce, tomatoes, and spinach. And you can see they just basically tanked by 1997, and I mean, this is 2017 when I last checked, and I'm sure it's not going up because standard agriculture practices does not really encourage adding trace minerals in the soil because they believe it's not needed for the plants. And I mean, plants don't really need these trace minerals to grow. They'll grow without them. There's three main minerals, NPK, that are used that plants really do need to grow, and so that's what's usually focused on in industrial agriculture, and then maybe sometimes up to 14 or maybe 15 or 16 trace minerals are put in. But in my garden, I add up to 70 trace minerals in the form of rock dust and up to 90 different trace minerals in the form of ocean solids. Let's go ahead and continue and show you some specific graphs. So here's the kale nutrient change, and from 1950 to 1999, you can see all the nutrients, or all the nutrients tested, have been declining. Onions, it's not any better. Watermelon, oh, the vitamin C went up, but some of the nutrients went down. And you know, besides just the nutrition in the soil, there's other factors that can play into how nutritious food is, and we'll cover that in a little bit. So if you think, John, but I buy organic, so I'm getting more nutrition in the food I'm buying. And actually, you would be correct. So in overall, but not always, in my opinion, based on the studies I've seen, organic is better than conventional. Not only are you not going to be getting the toxic pesticides or herbicides and fungicide sprays and all the different Roundup things on the organic food, but you're also going to get, in many cases, higher quality food, because at least in organic agriculture, they are putting a more diversified fertilizer source to create a more healthier product. But in my opinion, it's still not the answer and not as good as it should be. And so why are having the trace minerals in your food so important? Well, USDA has also done much research and testing, and they've correlated many different trace mineral deficiencies with many different diseases. So for example, I believe chromium and vanadium is something that they say diabetics should take because it has something to do with your blood sugar regulation. And so here's a little chart that shows as minerals go down, disease rates go up. So for example, for asthma, in 1980, I think there's 31.20 cases reports per 100,000 people. Anyways, the increase in asthma rates was 87.44% from 1980 to 1994. I mean, when I went to school, there was hardly any kids with asthma. I mean, I was one, and maybe there's like 2 other kids, but nowadays it seems like so many kids have asthma. And asthma and other diseases are actually not getting better, they're getting worse. And so that's correlated with a magnesium deficiency. Now, I'm not going to say if you have asthma, you have a magnesium deficiency. I don't know, but this is a correlation. Now, I want to also let you guys know that correlation does not equal causation. So the nutrients in fruits and vegetables can vary widely, and not all produce is created equal in nutrients. And some factors that can affect the nutrients in the produce you guys are buying or growing yourself are the growing practices. How is the produce you're buying grown? What kind of fertilizers or nutrients are they adding to the soil? I mean, I was just over on Kauai the other day and I was buying some turmeric. I love turmeric, one of my favorite root vegetables. And I asked the lady at the farmer's market, hey, what are the fertilizers you're adding to grow this turmeric? Because like if she said conventional, fertilizer, I probably wouldn't have bought it. But she said, hey, I use, organic inputs. I use chicken manure. So I'm like, all right, she uses chicken manure. So, many people don't realize that if they're vegan, a lot of the food you may be buying is grown with animal waste byproducts, whether that's manure-based byproducts or blood or bone meal, even worse. And so I was willing to accept that she used chicken manure because at least that's better than using synthetic fertilizers because a chicken manure will have a wider spectrum of different nutrients. But then you got to remember the chicken manure is only as good as the food that the chickens ate. So if the chickens ate GMO corn and soy and then they're pooping out the remnants of GMO corn and soy that have low nutrients, then the fertilizer the poop they produce is gonna have low nutrients, which consequently feeds the next round of crops that you're growing for you, like the turmeric that I was buying, and then those are the nutrients that you're gonna get. So it's like you're starting with a pie that's already not whole, in my opinion. So yeah, the growing practices can determine the nutrients when the produce was harvested. So this is huge, especially here in Hawaii, when a lot of the produce is actually shipped in from the mainland. It may be harvested a month ago. I mean, I know for a fact the apples you guys are buying now in your stores were picked last year in the mainland, and they've been in cold storage and actually even in an oxygen-deprived environment so that the produce will stay fresher longer. And this was quite surprising to me when I heard it originally. And actually, I just got an email today from somebody that bought a juicer from me and said, hey, John, I'm trying to juice apples in my juicer, and it used to work pretty good, but now it's not really working that good. It's backing up, and I don't know why. Well, I said, well, hey, the apples you're buying now have been in cold storage for 6 months, so right about now is when they start to get really kind of mealy and right before they're going to start to expire. And I don't know if any of you guys have noticed that, this time of year, the apples, if you're still eating apples, they get kind of softer and mushier, and they're just not quite as crisp or vibrant as they once was. And so, the time it's harvested is critical. I mean, within 48 hours of harvesting broccoli, there are reliable declines in certain phytochemicals and phytonutrients. I mean, this is relatively seen with when you buy kale that's imported from California from the store. I mean, it's kind of bitter, it's going yellow, it doesn't taste good, and your body is trying to let you know. When I grow something in my garden and I taste it, it tastes really sweet and delicious. So age off the vine, how long was it off the vine? So when I go to farmers markets, one of the questions I like to ask farmers is, hey, when did you harvest this? Especially if it's leafy greens, very important, right? If they harvested it a week ago, the nutrition is gonna be a lot lower than if we woke up at 4 a.m. this morning and we harvested right before we came here. Hey, that's great. That's the kind of food that I wanna buy when I'm traveling, right? And when I'm at home, I don't even harvest my food until I'm going to eat it. And to even minimize this further, a way you could do that is to grow sprouts and microgreens indoors, because as you eat the sprouts, they're still living. Another factor that can influence the nutrients in fruits and vegetables are the post-harvest practices. So I've learned a lot about the produce industry since I've been into raw foods. I go to wholesale produce terminals in California to buy my produce wholesale, and I know a lot of the tricks of the trade and stuff, and I like to share those in my videos. I'll share a little bit with you. But the post-harvest practices, so for example, they have this technique called hydro-cooling. So say they're harvesting cauliflower in the field in California, the farm worker will cut it up, off the vine, they'll take it and they'll put it in a refrigerated truck. And the ambient temperature outside could be 70, 80 degrees. They'll put it in this refrigerated truck and drop the temperature instantly down to like 32 degrees. And this is known as hydrocooling. And for the industry, this quote unquote locks in the freshness. And they do this so that the produce will last longer, because if they left that vegetable at ambient temperatures, it's not gonna last very long. So there's complex temperatures that also USDA has found out to keep produce at, to store them for the longest. I mean, right now in Las Vegas, even though I'm sitting here in Hawaii, I bought peppers like 2 weeks ago that I have stored at the optimal temperature of about between 46 and 50 degrees. And I'm crossing my fingers that when I get home, they're still gonna be all right and good to eat. And so I have a video on my raw foods channel,okraw.com, where I go into all the different temperatures and how you could look those up if you do need to store your produce. So how was the produce stored? Was it stored in water, without water? For example, if they're herbs, they should be put in water. They're going to store a little bit better because they're still living versus, outside of a fridge. And also the cultivar. So the cultivar that were grown, or the variety, so say Fuji apples, Granny Smith apples, Rome apples, these are all different varieties. Certain apples will be more nutritious than others. So the question is, how do you know what food is the most nutritious? And so that brings me to test the produce you grow and buy. So if you're growing your own produce, you can use this tool that I'll be sharing with you guys in a second to test your produce. If it's not good, then you can do things to improve it, right? We could always improve everything in life. And if you're going to buy produce, if you have one of these devices, you could test your produce to ensure you're getting and buying the best quality produce. And so this device is actually just called a refractometer. And so what the refractometer does, it allows you to check your fruits and vegetables on a Brix meter, and this is normally used by grape growers who make wine. Grape growers know that they only want to harvest their wine grapes when they're at a high Brix. The high Brix, to wine growers anyways, means it has a high sugar content, which then in turn that sugar content gets fermented down into the alcohol content so that they'll get a good alcoholic wine. But unfortunately, most farmers that don't grow grapes don't know what this device is, but it's a way you could actively test and find out the quality of the produce you're growing to find out if it's good or not. And if it's not good, you could improve it. And this has been something very important to me in my work because I've discovered that a lot of food is not as good as they say it is. So what is Brix? So within a given species of plant, the crop with a higher refractive index, or Brix, will have a higher sugar content, which is what most grape growers know. But more importantly for me, they have a higher mineral content, higher protein content, can be very important for some vegans, and a greater specific gravity or density. And this adds up to a sweeter tasting or more minerally nutritious food with lower nitrate and water content, lower freezing point, and better storage attributes. So then what happens is there's this standard refract index of crop juices, and this will let you know how good the produce you're growing or you're buying is. But see, the thing is, we don't really need a Brix meter because our taste buds are the best Brix meter on the planet. The problem with our taste buds is we don't have a good reference point. If you've only ever bought Dole Royal Hawaiian pineapples from the store, and that's what you're used to, especially the people on the mainland that even get worse than that. They get the ones from Costa Rica and Mexico that are even of poorer quality. You've only ever tasted really poor quality pineapples, in my opinion. You've never really tasted a good one. I know many of you guys may have a friend or a neighbor that grew pineapple and they harvested it when it was truly ripe. They used good fertilizer and maybe they even had a white sugar pine. And you ate it and you're like, wow, that's a really good pineapple. So you might have a good reference point, but unfortunately most people don't. But what the Brix meter allows you to do, it allows you to have a reference point as to the quality of the food. So I can't do it here because we're not supposed to have any food that's out here, but basically here's some of the pineapple that I ate this morning. And when I tested it earlier in the morning today, I got a reading that was like 11. And so if we go down the chart and we look pineapple, if it's a poor pineapple, it should be a 12. If it's an average pineapple, it should be a 14. If it's a good pineapple, it should be 20. And if it's an excellent pineapple, it should be 22. Now the pineapple my girlfriend and I ate this morning was an 11 when I read it this morning, but now I think it's reading more like 15. So that'd be maybe average. And this may depend on where you take your sample, near the core, near the outside. It's been sitting a while, but nonetheless, it's still maybe an average at best, poor at worst pineapple. It's nowhere near even a good pineapple or an excellent pineapple. And you could do this with most fruits or vegetables that they have on a standardized chart. Now, if the item is not on a standardized chart, like today we had longans. The longans, I think, were actually some of them were not so good. Some of them were actually really good. If it's not on the chart, then I encourage you guys, if you do get a refractometer, which are available for about $20 to $30 on Amazon.com, make sure you get a Brix refractometer 0 to 32. That's the most important thing, and make sure it has good reviews. But if it's not on the chart, then you would come up with your own chart. So every time you buy long-ons, you would actually just have like a page, and you would write down long-on I bought from this farm, and it's 22, or this long-on I bought this time was 18, or this long-on was 14. And then you'll see like patterns. You'll see, well, hey, the best long-on I had was 22, and once you get that 22 long-on, you eat it, and you're like, wow, that's a really good long-on. Then you eat one that's 14, you eat that, you're like, oh, there's no flavor, man. And then, so then you'll get to know and you'll train your taste buds if a fruit or vegetable is good or not. And now, why is this really important to us? Why do we care, the Brix refractometer meeting? Well, we'll get into that in a second, but I want to talk really quick on, this is what you're going to see when you get the refractometer coming around. So on your left side, you're going to see, it's going to look like that, and what we're going to look for is you're going to see a number where it goes from white to blue. And I think the one on the left side is reading 15, 16, 17, about 18 maybe, right below 20. And it's a cut and dry line. So aside from just the number, the refractometer also tells us further information, which is really important. And I'm sorry for the bad slide. But on this side, what we want to look for, instead of it goes from white to blue, we want to look for white to kind of like gradients of blue to blue. And so when it's fuzzy like that, that means it indicates that there's more minerals in the sample. And so the minerals are very important, as we talked about a little bit earlier. They may help us with different diseases. And why else is the Brix important? Well, this is the main slide that I want to share with you guys. And this is entitled The Quest for Nutrient-Dense Foods. So what happened was they took some grocery store green beans, and they took some garden beans that they grew, not even under ideal situations, and they tested the Brix. So the Brix on the grocery store bought green beans. The Brix was 4.2, and the taste was garbage. The pH was 5.5. On the garden beans, the Brix was 6.1, so that's definitely better, but I don't even think that's even really good on the Brix chart. And the pH was 6.4, so it was actually a more alkaline food. And some people are really into their alkaline and acid diet. So yeah, higher quality food is going to be more alkaline. And the taste was decent. And the most important part of this whole page to me is actually the bottom chart, which discusses the nutritional quality. They sent samples of the grocery store green beans and the garden beans off to the lab, and they got the results on the bottom. And if we look, for example, the magnesium is, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's double, but it's definitely maybe 30% more. The calcium is pretty much not quite double, but 40% more, I don't know. But some of the nutrients, like the zinc, is over double. I mean, one of the challenges with people in plant-based diets, maybe they may be zinc deficient. But hey, if you're not getting enough zinc from your food because the food's being grown in substandard conditions without the right nutrients in the fertilizer, you may not be getting enough nutrients. And the other thing that's really kicker for me is if we look at the bottom of this chart, the protein content of garden beans, homegrown, that's a higher Brix. It's not quite double, but it's significantly increased, like a lot more protein. So if somebody asks me, where do you get your protein, John? I say, I get it from my homegrown greens, and my foods that I grow, it has more protein than the food from the grocery store. Moving on, a next challenge, number 3, is limited food choices. And these can be 2 ways of limited food choices. Number 1 is self-imposed. And research shows that people eat the same foods day in and day out. I know many people in here, hey, I eat toast and coffee for breakfast or whatever you eat, and you go shopping, you get the same. I get bananas when I go shopping, I get this, I get that, and you always get the same thing. Another way that you're limited in food choices that many people may not realize is the agriculture system, right? Grocery stores only sell a small percentage of the edible plant foods that are available on Earth. Many people don't realize this. It's quite sad. So let's talk more about some of these. Self-imposed. So many people eat the same foods day in and day out. They follow a routine of certain recipes they like. You might have that green smoothie recipe you make every day, and it's like coconut water, bananas, and kale. And that's what you eat every day. And actually, that got some ladies in California in trouble by eating too much kale, because it was the organic kale they were using was grown in fields that actually had high contamination of heavy metals, and the kale took up some of these heavy metals, and then they had heavy metal toxicity. So that's not good. But once again, I don't necessarily recommend eating the same food each and every day. I always encourage a variety. But many people get into the routine of doing the same thing. So one of the things I like to do is I like to make eating a game. Like, hey, how can we eat something different today than what we ate yesterday? And so I always challenge myself to have new and different things. Number one, variety is the spice of life. I love different flavor sensations, different tastes, and plus I'm getting a better spectrum of these different phytochemicals and phytonutrients that both are researched and yet to be researched that have many beneficial, healthy effects. I also encourage people to purchase foods at the grocery store that you haven't purchased before. Maybe you've walked by those dandelion greens. You've never bought dandelion greens. Well, I'll tell you, dandelion greens aren't the best tasting green in the produce section, but they are definitely really good for you. I like to juice them myself. I would encourage you to try some of the different foods that you haven't tried before. Rotate that in. Instead of using kale in your green smoothie, use dandelion greens. Use some escarole or endive. Those are some really trippy greens. Go to your farmers markets to find foods that are not available at your grocery store. Some of the local farmers markets here are great. I think the other day I saw water spinach, which is something I like a lot at the local farmers market. And of course, grow your own. That's the best way to have the biggest diversity in your diet. Another block to diversity in your diet is not self-imposed by you, but through the agriculture system. When you go into the produce section of a store that might look something like that, they'll have the appearance of abundance. They might have over 200 different varieties of fruits and vegetables and foods you could buy. But really, 200 varieties is a drop in the bucket compared to all the different edible foods that are on the planet. There's over 7,000 different edible foods available on this planet. How many of you tried? My goal is to try as many of them as I can. There are thousands of different types of edible plants grown on the planet. You want to visit a website, one of my favorites, actually I visit it regularly, PFAF, that's Plants for a Future database.org, and it has a searchable database with over 7,000 different kinds of plants that are edible. And they tell the, some of the different, how they're grown, what zone they could be grown in, some of the traditional uses, how they were used, what parts of the plants were used, whether the stem were used, whether the flower was used, whether the fruit was used, whether it was eaten cooked, whether it was eaten raw, all kinds of good information. Also, they give it an edibility rating from I think it's 0 to 5, and also a medicinal rating 0 to 5. So if the edible rating's really high, then you know it's probably gonna taste good. And if it's kind of low, it might taste kind of more bitter or kind of different. I kind of like bitters myself, and I've gotten used to eating really deep, rich greens. Anyways, each plant creates its own unique set of phytonutrients and phytochemicals that can be health promoting. So here's some ways to increase your variety. You could visit farmers markets and talk to farmers and ask them, hey, what unique foods do you have? I know there's a guy here in Honolulu, he's growing this plant that probably most of you guys haven't eaten. It's actually called ice plant. And I believe it's grown in, I believe it's from Africa. And actually it looks like it has like dried little ice crystals on the plant. It's totally a trip. He grows it actually indoors under aeroponics. It's actually quite interesting. He sells it at actually some local stores in the area. But that's one that's really cool. Kind of tastes salty. But anyways, visit farmers and farmers markets and ask them for new and different foods. Go to ethnic markets that may have unique foods that you're not familiar with. I know a lot of the different Asian markets personally have a lot of different cool Asian greens that most Americans may not be familiar with. And the other thing to increase your diversity of your foods I would recommend is go on a wild foods walk. I don't know anybody in this area that does, actually I do. There's a guy that does wild foods walks in the area, and you could go on a wild foods walk with him, and you could learn about some of the wild foods that are in the area, and you could make sure it's safe to eat, and if he's with you, he'll let you know. And you could pick those and eat those, and this will increase your diversity. And of course, the best way, in my opinion, is grow your own, because then you could be fully integrated with knowing the nutrients and the fertilizers that are going in to grow your food, whether you want them to be veganic or not, whether you want to add the trace minerals or not. And also you could choose the different seeds and plants that you grow, so you could grow as many as 7,000 different varieties of plants on Earth, as provided they grow in this particular climate. And one of my other favorite plant-based doctors, Dr. Joel Fuhrman, he wrote this book, Eat to Live, another book that I would recommend to you guys. And he says, the nutrient you need the most is the one you're not getting. And I really thought about that. I'm like, wow. And there's so many different plants that create all these different phytonutrients that are very important to me that I may not be getting. So one of the biggest revelations in my dietary life is to start including new and different plants that most people may not be aware of. And that's what I want to really get into next. And so I really want to encourage everybody to have some of these plants. You really need to grow your own. And I know many of you guys may not have ever grown your own food before. And so this is your lucky day, because what I've done in this the next few slides is actually I'm going to show you guys the easiest vegetables to grow here in Hawaii that could almost grow unattended. If you've been successful at growing a lawn outside your house and maybe some shrubs and some trees in your yard, which many of you guys that live in a home may have those things, and if they've been alive all these years while you've been at your house, you could easily grow any of these plants, because unlike a standard vegetable plant that you have to plant, they grow, and then you have to harvest them, and then you have to replant, looks like vegetables in the field. The plants that I'm going to recommend to you guys grow like shrubs and trees, just like the ones you've been tending to, and they're much more tolerant. The picture there shows a house on the mainland, and just a food forest garden that's not looking like row crops, but all these plants have some edible part to them, whether they're the fruits that are seen or some of the leaves. You plant these plants literally just once, and you could keep them alive for years, right? So it's not like you're having to keep regrowing and replanting things. Generally, these plants, which are known as tropical perennial vegetables, and of course you could plant some fruit trees too. The tropical perennial vegetables are much more valuable to me personally than the tropical fruit trees, because tropical fruit trees, if you think about it, depending on what kind of tree you get, it may produce only one time a year. You know, maybe star fruit may produce a couple times a year, bananas and papayas even more times a year, but the leafy greens are growing greens every day that you could harvest every day, so they're much more valuable, and in my opinion, they're going to save you a lot more money, and also the greens are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. Also, according to Dr. Joel Furman and his ANDI scoring list or chart, stands for aggregate nutrient density. What Dr. Joel Furman did is he calculated the calories in the food compared to the nutrients. And so he came up with a chart that goes from like 0 to 1,000, and he wants to encourage people to eat foods that are on the top of the chart. So the foods on the top of the chart are things like the watercress and collard greens and other leafy greens. They dominate the top of the chart. Then maybe after that are some of the other vegetables. Then maybe after that are some fruits. And then it gets down to other plant foods. And then, of course, the other animal products and junk foods. And even like once you get down to the bottom, it's like a 0 is like soda. And I don't encourage that on anybody. Let's see. Let's go ahead and move on. So this is the first one I want to share with you guys. I think everybody should grow here. I tried before my talk to locate a source where everybody could go out and purchase this plant. But unfortunately, nobody really propagates these plants. They're usually started by cuttings. The best recommendation I would give to you guys is go to Google and search for permaculture Oahu. And whatever websites come up, contact them, because permaculture people generally will have some of these perennial vegetables. And the katuk, basically, all you do is you take a cutting of it, you could stick it in the ground as long as it's watered fairly well, or even stick it in a vase in your house. It'll actually just grow roots. Once it grows roots, then you could plant it in the ground. What's going to happen, it's going to grow into a little tree-like shrub, and the greens that you could harvest taste like peanuts. And besides just the greens you could harvest, they have a nice nutty flavor. You could harvest the tips, the top shoots. They're very tender. They remind me of eating asparagus. And they grow year-round. I do not recommend eating this in high amounts or juicing it, because there are some, like in every food, there's some toxins in here that may not be good for you. That's why I encourage diet rotation and not eating the same thing each and every day, just like the example I gave with some ladies in California eating kale every day. Every plant has phytochemicals and phytonutrients. Some of these phytonutrients and phytochemicals are beneficial to us, and some may be harmful to us. But it's all dose dependent. So if you eat too much of anything, may not be a good thing. And some of the things katuk may be helpful with is breast milk creation if you're nursing, eye health, hypertension, and osteoporosis. Now, as much as I'm going to list that's what some of these plants may be helpful with, I don't like the whole cure model myself. For example, if you get a headache, you take an aspirin, it makes a headache go away. The cure for a headache, in my opinion, is not taking an aspirin, but it's doing the things to not get the headache in the first place, which is a whole food, plant-based diet. So next, this is my favorite edible leafy green that I had some just the other day on Kauai. Actually, a lady brought it to the VSH potluck on Kauai over there. And it's actually called Bele, edible hibiscus. Now this grows as a tree, and this is a traditional crop in the Pacific Islands. And this tree has edible leaves. They look like that. They're really nice, soft, and succulent, and have a really neutral flavor. This would be great to use instead of tortillas for wraps. I mean, I love to wrap up like guacamole or hummus or salsa in there, roll it up and eat it. You could also just chop these up and add it to a salad. And they have a really nice, mild, neutral flavor. You know, I'd much rather eat this than like imported from California lettuce, for example. And once again, this, when you plant it once, you take a cutting of the plant, you stick it in the ground, it'll just grow into trees. So, I mean, I would just have this like lined around my property, and I could just go out when I'm hungry, and instead of growing in the grocery store, it's a lot easier to walk out your front door, pick a few leaves, come inside, and have a salad than to have to go to the grocery store, go to the farmer's market, and then you don't even know how the stuff was grown or when it was picked. So this may be helpful with things like anemia, osteoporosis, insomnia, inflammation, and heart disease. Moving on, another one of my favorite leafy greens, it's known as Gynera procumbens, also known as longevity spinach or cholesterol spinach. Guess why? This has been traditionally used in Thai folk medicine. So some of the foods that I'm explaining to you guys are not like brand new foods. You guys may have never heard of them before, but traditional cultures around the world and areas where these are from have used them for hundreds or thousands of years for health. It's a perennial plant. It likes the tropics. It doesn't like freezing. I am keeping it alive in Las Vegas with a little hoop house or a little greenhouse over my raised bed. And also I bring my plants into a greenhouse in the winter when it gets too cold. It's rich in phytochemicals and phytonutrients, and this may be helpful with cholesterol, diabetes, high blood pressure, and cancer. Next, taking Gynera procumbens to the next level is one that's more common here. It's actually known as Okinawan spinach, and this is another Gynera family of plants. It's Gynera bicolor. And this is closely related to the previous one, the Gynera procumbens. But this one, if you look at it, has they're green leaves on the top, but the underside of the leaves are deep, rich purple. And guess what? The deep, rich purple means they're more nutritious because they have those anthocyanins that we talked about in the rodent study earlier. But these also may be helpful with similar conditions to the other Gynera, and I would encourage you guys to plant both of them. I've noticed in my climate that these guys, the Okinawan spinach, grow much slower than the longevity spinach. Another one that I really would encourage people to grow are the chives. Dr. Joel Furman has identified the onion family and garlic and chive family plants to be anti-cancerous, anti-disease, and many people don't know that as good as the onion bulbs are, the greens of the onion plant are actually much more nutrient dense than the bulbs because they have some of the similar properties as the onions, but they also have the chlorophyll and all the other nutrients. So these are another really easy to grow year-round. You could grow it in your garden or even in a pot. The allium family plants are rich in sulfur. This also grows delicious edible flowers that you could dress up for salads and make it look pretty. And when you harvest your own flowers, you'll be eating the pollen. So you'll be collecting the pollen yourself instead of letting the bees do it for you. And that's the way I like to get my pollen. These chives are actually mild tasting, and they're more nutritious than onion bulbs, as I said. And research have shown it may be helpful with prostate cancer and stomach cancer. So here's a picture of me and my dad, and that's in my garden. It was actually taken, I think, about 2 weeks ago, right before I came out here. And they were visiting. It was really nice. But there's many uncommon vegetables that have been grown in different cultures around the world for their health benefits. And the picture showing to the side of me, or the side of me and my dad, I have a whole bed of ashataba. And ashataba is a special vegetable that's grown in Japan. But many wild vegetables or uncultivated vegetables, not the ones you'd find in the store, have actually even higher levels of phytonutrients and phytochemicals than the store-bought ones. So for example, lettuce, I have some tropical lettuce that really has a nice strong flavor, and those are some more phytonutrients and phytochemicals that may be more health promoting. They also have unique flavors they may not be used to. The ashataba to me kind of tastes like a celery, like a sweet celery, but then some people it tastes bitter, so my taste buds are probably off because I'm used to eating all these greens. But some of these greens may taste stronger for some people, and I want to encourage you to stick to it, and if they're too strong for you at first, or reduce the amount you're eating. And so, for example, if you're not used to eating ashitaba or some of the other greens that I talked about, maybe like a moringa, which is another one I didn't mention, another one that everybody should grow, a really strong flavor, dilute it with, say, like something that's with a mild flavor. So make like a bowl, like a salad, take like 90% lettuce, and then do like 10% moringa. So you have a salad of mostly lettuce, which is what you're used to, a nice mild flavor, with some of the more stronger tasting greens that you may not be used to, so you could get them in you. So this is the one that I grow. This is probably my number one favorite vegetable that I grow. It's a rare edible vegetable from Longevity Island in Japan. I think it's known as a Hashijo Island. Anyways, when you cut this plant, it bleeds this yellow sap, as you can see in the top picture, and when you cut us, we bleed red. But it bleeds this yellow sap, and actually the sap is rich in chalcones, which is a special polyphenol they've done a lot of research about in Japan. It grows in Las Vegas year-round for me, and one of the interesting things about this plant is that it's said to contain vitamin B12. I don't know if that's true or not, and I'm not relying on B12 for my ashitaba. I do take a B12 supplement, as I recommend every vegan and vegetarian too. This may be helpful with shedding visceral fat, which is one of the worst kinds of fats you could have, the fats around your organ, according to Dr. Joel Fuhrman, Alzheimer's, skin, lung cancer, cholesterol, high blood pressure. Another one I like a lot that I learned about, actually both these, the ashitaba and the Egyptian spinach, I didn't come to learn about randomly. I attend the Natural Products Expo generally twice a year that I've been going to for at least maybe the last 10 years, which is the trade show for the health food industry. So if you're a health food store owner, you go to this trade show to find out all the new products. There's different doctors trying to sell you stuff. And I found actually somebody selling the Egyptian spinach and ashitaba powdered tablets. And they wanted me to, they had all this information on how good these foods were, but they want you to buy a little powdered tablet. And I thought, well, hey, John, you could buy this powdered tablet and keep spending $30 for 15 ounces. And I'm Chinese, man. I'm really cheap. I'm like, how could I beat the system? How could I get these for way cheaper? Well, hey, I could find the seeds, grow in my garden, and I could have all I want for free. And so that's how I learned about the Egyptian spinach. And it's actually in the mallow family related to okra. It has a mucilaginous texture, but it also has actually a nice mild flavor. And it's a vegetable form of jute, and it's known as the king of vegetables. It's said to be more nutritious than kale, and we know how nutritious kale is. It has 12 times more beta-carotene than broccoli, 9 times more calcium than spinach, and it's a summer-grown vegetable, so it should grow great here. And it may be helpful with boosting your immune system, diabetes, and liver detoxification. So finally, I'd like to say my solution to poor quality food is to grow your own. You could control all the factors that go into the quality of your food. Growing different exotic vegetables that you may not be familiar with, that you may not have access to gain some of these phytonutrients and phytochemicals, both researched and unresearched. You could also add, once again, the right soil nutrients. So you're gonna have higher quality food. You're gonna have, you could have unlimited varieties and grow so many different things. And besides, gardening is just a good thing to do. You could get vitamin D from the sun, the best way to get our vitamin D in my opinion. You get a connection with nature, something a lot of kids these days unfortunately are missing, and I think we are paying for it. You could de-stress, you get exercise, and you're gonna know where your food comes from. So, as much as I've gardened myself, I've visited so many gardens around the country, and actually even around the world, and not all gardens are created equal. And just because you grow a home garden doesn't mean your quality is gonna be superior than the store. It's quite sad that sometimes I go to gardens and the food quality isn't that good. I tested some homegrown citrus from a lady's orchard in Kauai, and it's actually kind of low on the brick scale, which is sad. But that could be an opportunity for improvement. And so some of the best practices that I like to teach for gardening, and I can't really get into them in detail here, but I will tell you to go to growingyourgreens.com, where I have many different videos on how to grow high quality food, as well as at least over a dozen videos I've filmed here in the Hawaiian Islands that'll be directly related to everybody that lives here on different plants that'll grow well here and how to do it when I visited different places. But I want everybody to grow beyond organic food, not just organic. As good as the organic standard is, I think there's a lot to be desired in the standards. But we really need to add a few things to grow high quality food, and that's number one, compost. And that's, organic gardeners will always say use compost, and that's a given. But most people don't realize there's actually two different kinds of compost. One is made with a bacterial or a heat or thermal based compost, and one is made basically using fungus or like mycelia and mushrooms that break down wood chips slowly over time. This is what happens on a forest floor. It's not a hot active pile, it's breaking down, and a fungal dominated compost could take like 3 years in, say, Oregon to break down. I mean, maybe here it'll be a lot quicker just due to the nicer climate, the weather, and all the water you guys get. But some of the largest leaves that I ever saw, like I had dinosaur kale leaves that are actually as wide and would cover my face when I visited my friend's farm in Portland, Oregon, who's basically just using the wood chips, which is a free resource that normally they have to take to the dumps and pay to get rid of, the arborists. They just dumped that all on their property and let it rot down for several years, and they had some of the healthiest food that I've ever seen. Aside from the compost, the bacterial and fungal compost, you need to add things like rock dust, which will add up to 70 different trace minerals that most, even organic farmers, are not adding. Also the ocean solids, which can contain up to 90 different trace minerals. The microbes, which are very important, much like we are actually more microbe than human, it said. The microbiome, which is a big keyword that many people may have heard about these days. We have, healthy gut flora, probiotics that live within us, and they are collectively part of our immune system and help us digest our food and make secondary plant metabolites or secondary metabolites from the bacteria that are antioxidants and things for us. And they're also very essential in the soil. And the thing that's wrong with commercial farming, whether organic or conventional, we're losing soil organic matter, which is the compost aspect, because they're not replacing it because they're putting synthetic fertilizers that actually kill all the microbial action. But also we're losing, besides the organic matter, we're losing all the microbes. Those are the real free workhorses in the soil that are making the whole system work, and they make us work too. And so I really want to caution people also against using manures. As I mentioned earlier, manure is a common source of organic nutrients for a garden. And they may be contaminated. They may be contaminated with different drugs that the animals are being fed that's actually going right through the animal and ending up in their excrements. They may also have remnants of GMO corn or soy. They also may be fed like high heavy metal food, because one of the ways they disperse heavy metals is to actually spread it on farmland. In most cases, they don't allow that to be put on farmland that's meant for human consumption, but for animal consumption. So this is even another reason why you don't want to eat animals. Nonetheless, you use their fertilizer to grow your foods because of the heavy metal contamination that the animals may have in their tissues, but also in their excrements. So I encourage a plant-based style of gardening. You could basically, the thing that feeds other plants are plants. If you look out into the forest, the trees drop their leaves. Once in a while, a tree may drop. All that stuff rots down. It breaks down. It creates more fertility for the soil, and then the forest grows more. So you could use a plant-based compost. And actually, I visited the facility out here on Oahu where they make compost from plant scraps, and actually have a video documenting that. I think that's a pretty good compost to start with. So in summary, I'd like to say, I want to encourage everybody here to preferably eliminate or massively reduce their consumption of all animal products and processed foods. Yes, even vegan ones, and eat more whole plant foods, especially the fruits and vegetables. Number 2, test the food with the Brix meter. Get a Brix meter. When you buy food, you could test it to know you're getting better quality. I mean, one of the easiest ways, if you go to the farmer's market and they have samples out, there's like 5 places selling mangoes, they have samples out, get a sample before you buy it, sample it, put it on your tester, go around to all the places that sell the mangoes, get the one that has the highest number. That way you're going to get the highest quality food with the most nutrients, right? It's going to be more protein rich, more trace mineral rich. And if you're growing your food, then use that as a tool so that you can improve the way you're growing your food. So you could have the highest quality food, because the highest quality food with the most nutrients, that means you're going to be healthier. And then number 3, grow a garden. Growing a garden can massively allow you to increase the varieties of the healthiest foods on the planet that money can't buy. You can't simply go to the store and buy some of the foods that I've shared with you guys unless they're maybe dried or powdered, and then they're actually quite expensive. So I have a lot of free resources online, over 2,200 videos viewed over 75 million times, growingyourgreens.com, okraw.com, and discountjuicers.com.
Thank you very much, John Kohler, for this really wonderful presentation. Not just nutrient-rich, but information-rich. Thank you so much. Mahalo for coming. Good night, everyone. Have a safe trip home.